team all set to go? Excellent, cool. Well, welcome to the session, everyone. I'm Mhairi, and I'm Head of Student Voice and Diversity at the Student Room. And in my role, I have the pleasure of working with young people all the time, every day, and I love it greatly. And I'm really pleased that we're able to be here today with three amazing students who are going to be sharing with you their perspectives, especially around their journey applying to uni. And I'll let you introduce yourselves in just a moment, team. So thank you to everyone who's come to join us today as well, and for everyone who submitted questions before the session. We got so many questions, it was amazing. So we're going to do our best to cover as many as we possibly can in this session. We're aiming to spend about 40 minutes going through some of the questions that have been submitted before the session. And then we're hoping to have time to take a few questions from you as well as we go. So if you would like to submit a question, if we've got time to ask the students, we will do. If you can do that through the Q&A box, that would be really useful. And then we'll go through those questions toward the end of the session and pick a few out to answer. And if you've got any kind of general feedback or thoughts or whatever, you can pop those in the chat box where everyone will be able to see those as well. I think that's everything in terms of getting us all started. I should say as well, we're recording the session, so we will send a recording around after today, so you can watch that back or share it with any colleagues who might not be with us today. And if you've got any questions that don't get answered in the session, the team from the student room will do their best to help get answers to those questions for you as well. And on that note, let's introduce you. Wonderful students, thank you for spending some of your summer holidays coming in and chatting with us today. We were just talking before, I was telling the students how meaningful it is whenever all of us get to hear from young people themselves. So yeah, we really do appreciate your time today. So we're going to go around the room, and could you please introduce yourself with your first name, your preferred pronouns, your current year level, and what you're studying, like A levels or whatever you're studying, and what's your plan after year 13? If you forget any of those things, just shout. And we'll kick off with you, Gina.
Hi, I'm Gina. My preferred pronouns are she and her, and currently in year 13, I've just finished studying criminology, sociology, theatre studies, and I did an EPQ, and my future plans are to go. So my top choice was Royal Holloway, and I'm hoping to do an integrated master's in psychology.
Amazing, thanks Gina. Over to you, Raj.
Hi, my name is Raj. My preferred pronouns are he, him. I'm studying A levels in maths, computing, and English language, and I'm in year 12. I plan to go to uni, probably Liverpool or Queen Mary's after year 13, and probably a maths degree.
Amazing, thanks Raj. And Ikra.
Hi, my name's Ikra. My pronouns are she and her. I've just finished A levels in biology, chemistry, and maths. And my first choice is University of Manchester for a master's in pharmacy.
Amazing, thank you so much. Excellent. Well, we'll get cracking today. As I say, we're going to try and get through as many questions as we possibly can. And we thought we'd start off by asking you all a little bit about when you started researching university, or what you're going to do after year 13, and kind of your application journey so far. Obviously, if you're in year 13 right now, you will be in the midst of waiting for your results and that challenging in between time. But kind of, yeah, up until this point, and Raj, obviously you've got kind of, you're at the beginning of this journey right now. So perhaps we'll start with you, Ikra, if that's all right. So when did you start your university research, and when did you make your decision of who to apply to?
It was last year, so that was like the January in year 12 I started to apply. So I just like made a profile on UCAS and just like looked at all courses. I knew what I was going to do at that point, so I just started to look at like universities and like what university offer that course. But I probably decided like where to go in the summer between year 12 and 13, and then I applied in, I think it was like late November, December time, because the deadline was January the following year.
Amazing, thank you. Gina, what about you?
I started looking at the summer before year 13, I think around June. And I remember making my decision around October time, which is like the last open day I went to was the day I made my decision. Yeah.
Interesting. Open day perhaps was a clincher there then. We're going to talk about open days in a little bit as well. Amazing, thank you. And Raj, where are you at when it comes to kind of researching or making your decisions about where you might want to go to uni?
At the moment with me, I've got a list in my head of unis I might want to go to and ones I've got a stronger preference for. So I guess compared to these two, I started a bit earlier, which might be a bit unusual, but I started to think about it maybe towards the end of year 11, which is closer to the time that Ikra was deciding, I guess, because I wanted to know how my A-level choices would affect what degree I wanted to go on to do, which is quite important, I think.
Yeah, really interesting point about A-level choices there. I think you probably wouldn't be the only one mentioning or thinking about that, especially if you do know what it is you're hoping to study kind of after year 13. Amazing, thank you. So it sounds like you all do have a top, well, of course, for Gina and Ikra, you've got a first choice, but for Raj, it sounds like you do as well. So thinking about your top choice university, what was the biggest factor that influenced you to put that university at the top of your list? And maybe this time we'll start with Gina.
So the thing that influenced me the most was actually the feel of the campus, because I'm very easily influenced. Well, my mental health is very easily influenced by my surroundings, and so all the facilities as well, which kind of ties into the feel of the campus. So sort of whether I wanted to take the more scientific route, psychology, or the less scientific route, and also the facilities that paired with that really influenced my choices.
Really interesting, thank you. I'm not surprised in that case about the open day being a really important part of your decision-making process. Yeah, it must also be hard for a lot of students who've had to make that decision without being able to go to real life open days over the past couple of years. So I'm glad that was possible. Amazing, thank you. Raj, what about you?
I think what matters to me in the universities is I was trying to look for something that was attainable for my level, but not somewhere where I wouldn't be challenged. So I was focusing quite heavily on the predicted grades and like trying to gauge where I was on track to get. So like trying to match the predicted grades to what I was getting at the moment. And then the rest just followed, I guess, looking at the courses which I was interested in and choosing from there.
Interesting. So far your kind of decision making has been driven by what you think is likely to happen when you get your results and where you might be likely to get an offer. Really interesting, thank you. Ikra, what about you? What influenced your top choice?
I think for me it was how it was the teaching style and the how the course was structured that really resonated with me, because all of the universities, so I applied to 5, all of them offered the same degree, but how they were taught differed. So it's my top choice. There's this thing where it works on the science of memory, and that really interests me. And how lecturers are so passionate about it as well. And also the communication between the university and me, leaflets, and how they were always in touch with me about where I wanted to go next. That was quite attractive as well.
The communication that came from the university was important to you as well in making that decision, and the teaching methodology. Really interesting, amazing, thank you. Slightly different question now, I suppose, maybe not necessarily in relation to the decision that you yourself has made, but thinking, I suppose, about other students your age perhaps. Do you feel like university is still seen as the main pathway to a career? Or do you think that more people are looking towards vocational courses or things like apprenticeships? And Raj, perhaps we'll start with you for this one.
I feel like it's still seen as the most traditional route, if that makes sense. But I don't know how many people used to look into apprenticeships, but I know they've probably risen in popularity a lot. And loads of my friends are considering going down routes like that, or loads of my friends from secondary school took up vocational qualifications instead of A-levels. And some of them don't want to go into higher education at all. So there's definitely a variety, and I feel like it's grown in popularity. So even though it's still quite traditional, it's not necessarily what everybody's going for.
Yeah, really interesting, amazing, thank you. Gina, what about you?
From what I've experienced with my friends, I think university hasn't been with the view of towards a career. I think people have been looking more vocationally from my perspective, but it's still an option, but I don't necessarily think that people are choosing it, because like at this age especially, not a lot of people have that in their sights from sort of my friendship group.
Can I just check, do you mean that, like, if people are going to university straight from A-levels, do you think that it's more for the experience or for the studying, and not maybe career path is secondary to that? Is that what you're saying?
From what I've experienced, a lot of my friends have gone because they feel like that is the next step, and not because they've necessarily had something in mind, or not even with a specific subject in mind. I think that is quite common.
Cool, yeah, makes sense. Awesome, thank you. Ikra, what about you?
I mean, I do know that a lot of people are like applying to apprenticeship. Like a lot of my friends have ditched their uni applications to do an apprenticeship, because especially like the degree level ones, because they like I think it's a degree and then you can like work at the same time and get paid, so it's more attractive. So I wouldn't say it's still the main pathway, like not for a career anyway. But then again, it is down to personal preference. So like not everyone can get into apprenticeship, and not everyone like would not go to university as well. So it's balanced, but I don't think it is the main pathway anymore.
Really interesting. It feels like maybe it's moving away from that, and really interesting that you mentioned degree apprenticeships as well. We've had quite a lot of feedback from the student room from students about interest in things like degree apprenticeships, and it's interesting that you highlight like still degree, but like there's sort of an additional or different part to it as well. Really interesting. Cool, thank you. I'm going to sneak this question in here before we move on a little bit, and that question is around the cost of living. Obviously, I'm sure everyone who's watching today, and I'm sure yourselves as well, have heard lots about the cost of living and perhaps been impacted by it yourselves or your families. So the question is, has the rising cost of living changed your outlook on your future after year 13, whether that be in relation to where you might study, a type of career you might want, kind of anything at all? Does that play into your future? Ikra, perhaps we can start with you.
I wouldn't say like particularly just yet, but I did think of like which would be the best like method of like transport, whether like should I get public transport or take my own car. And it's actually more expensive because like fuel is really expensive now, and like you'd have to pay for, I think like it's like a clean air zone charge, like in cities that you have to pay for, like you have to buy a permit or something. So it would be cheaper public transport. But originally I was going to just drive in. That's what I've kind of thought of at the moment. I think it'll impact me more once I go to university.
Yeah, interesting. That conversation about fuel and the decision between public transport or being able to drive yourself, really good point. Thank you. Raj, what about you?
So I'm thinking a lot about any potential. So I'm looking at all the universities I have in mind and seeing if they've got any scholarships that apply to me, or bursaries, things that I can apply for. And I'm trying to look into how to budget properly. So I guess that's part of student life anyway, but it kind of applies to the cost of living crisis. So I need to kind of learn that before I go to uni.
very interesting point. We've also seen a lot of information or a lot of opinions on the student room about financial skills and kind of the need to get those financial skills. Gina, what about you?
The rising cost in living is absolutely terrifying. I don't feel prepared at all. I don't have support very much from my parents in doing so. So going to university for me is quite scary. I did apply for scholarships. Unfortunately, I got rejected from all of them. And also bursaries is something that I haven't had enough information on. So for me, it's one of the biggest worries, because it's obviously going to be a problem. I'm hoping to move to London too, so it's going to be a bit more expensive, and I'm worried as well for my sort of quality of life when I'm over there. But just have to stay hopeful.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're probably speaking for a fair few young people at the moment by saying that. So it sounds a little bit like, and this perhaps leads us into our next point, it sounds a little bit like any information that is possible for universities or anyone who might be involved in kind of supporting students to be able to share with you when it comes to kind of money management, bursaries, scholarships, those sorts of things. Sounds like that would be mad helpful to kind of hopefully ease some of those concerns, but also helps you to understand what support actually is out there. And there's lots of very interesting research at the moment about kind of the impact of managing finances and perhaps and struggling in that way can have on students. So yeah, I think the level of awareness that the three of you obviously already have about it is really impressive, and a really good kind of starting point. So well done you. Great. Let's move on slightly, but perhaps this is a bit linked, as I say. What information or what communications would you say are helpful from universities? And just to kind of spark your thinking a little bit, you might think about things like whether a printed or an online prospectus is useful. Is live or on-demand content helpful, like a live webinar like this? Or would you prefer to watch stuff back? This is an interesting question given what we've already talked about, but like real life or digital open days, those sorts of things. What have you found helpful, I suppose, so far when it comes to the communications you've received from universities? And Gina, let's start with you.
I think on-demand information is very helpful, because obviously not everyone can make it to live things, or every one of them. And to look through things in your own time and be able to reflect on it is very helpful, especially in retaining information. I think in regards of information, I think definitely finance is something that you need more information on, especially with student finance. Is quite tricky when you have questions, especially to get in touch. So if, from my experience, if universities could be more proactive in sort of answering questions to students, although I know it can be tricky, but financial questions like that.
Amazing, thank you. That's really helpful. Ikra, let's come to you next.
Yeah, I completely agree with Gina. I think the on-demand stuff is really helpful because you can just kind of access it whatever. And a lot of the time, universities kind of answer the like frequently asked questions, and you can just access them whenever. You don't have to like join at a particular time. I feel like open days have been quite helpful as well, because you can kind of go there and get a feel of the university, and like the impression you get is quite accurate. And like when you meet tutors and you talk to people in like real life, it's a lot more kind of, it's more like easier to get a feel for the university, I think.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you. I'm gonna prod you a little bit on that question about open days in a minute too. Great, thank you. Raj, what about you?
So what I did when I first started looking at universities was I went online and I ordered a bunch of different prospectuses, and that was really useful for me because I just looked through every single page that I thought was relevant, and it was very easy to gather information that way. So I quite like, I guess it counts as on-demand information, but it's not online. So yeah, I liked that.
And so that was real life physical prospectuses that you got sent. Would you say that that's your preference, or does it not matter whether they're physical prospectuses or digital?
I don't think it matters if they're physical or not, because they're really the same thing, the same information. One might be easier for you than another. I personally just liked having the physical thing and being able to flick through.
Yeah, nice one. Cool, thank you. On to open days. What works well, what doesn't? Like real life, virtual? Are there things that work better in real life or things that work better in a virtual open day? Are there times where you would use one or the other? Basically, a very open question to you about what makes a good open day? And maybe I'm losing track of who's starting each of these, but maybe let's start with you, Raj, first.
So I feel like the point of an open day is to go and look at the university, judge how the environment is. So while a virtual open day might be good in giving you some information, it doesn't really fulfill the purpose for me. So I appreciate having virtual open days purely because of what I learn, but I'd rather be there on campus and see the environment.
Cool, thank you. Gina, what about you?
I think as important as grasping the feel of the campuses, if you can't attend it, which many can't, I think the interactiveness between not only pupils, but sort of teachers at the university is really helpful. Information about how it is and just any questions that you can answer is one of the biggest, I think it's really helpful. That's what I thought of.
Amazing, thank you. And Ikra, what about you?
I think I definitely prefer the real life kind of open days because you, like I say, you meet tutors, you can like do stuff and get a feel for the university and the course as well. And like if you get like a more accurate like impression. But like digital is quite good for like people who can't come or live far away. I feel like virtual ones need to be more well structured and like have the right like structured information so no one's like missing out on not going to like the real life one.
It's a really interesting point about kind of, yeah, if it's because people can't attend real life open days, how can universities make it so that students aren't missing out as much as possible, I suppose. I'm also thinking about the university staff who are planning double the amount of events these days as they might have been before the pandemic. So it's appreciated, it sounds like, the option to have both. It seems like it's very much appreciated, but that vibe of being on campus is something that during the pandemic was you to kind of have that experience as well to help you with your decision making. This one again is a little bit different and is a kind of general question. Do you think that there are things that universities could do to attract and support more diverse students? So could be, for example, students who would be referred to as widening participation. So for example, students who receive free school meals. It could be students from a minoritized background, it could be LGBTQ+ students or students with disabilities. Are there things that you have noticed or that you've thought of kind of in your journey that universities could do to perhaps support or attract students from different backgrounds? And let's start with Ikra.
If it makes sense, but I thought like you could create like a diversity focused environment, kind of like how you have societies in universities and they like, like the societies with different cultures and different like nationalities. If like they could be kind of like advertised, displayed, I feel like people be more like included and like you could encourage like the formation of even more societies to make sure that more students aren't like discriminated and more people are included. If it makes sense, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it makes total sense. It seems like you're talking about that, like the sense of belonging, like making sure that people feel like they can belong and making that clear. It sounds like that's important. Amazing, thank you. Gina, what do you think?
I think that people from lower income households, personally, I would like the feeling of individual support into the transition into adulthood. Because I think a lot of the time the presumption is that your parents are there to help. And, you know, for people who used to sorry, it's hard to explain, but for example, free school meals, not everyone from a low income household would receive free school meals. And I think that to make people from lower income households feel more supported, I think sort of individual, like being reached out to would help a lot, and letting people know that they're not alone, because not a lot of people's parents can help them with financial issues. So I think the support and letting people know that it's there is a big step.
Yeah, really interesting, and kind of seems like it touches a little bit on what we were speaking about earlier, in terms of that, the kind of financial well-being piece around what happens if you're a student who perhaps doesn't fit under this umbrella, and you also don't fit under this umbrella, like the students who are kind of in that middle piece. How can universities identify those people and, as you say, reach out to them, and be, I guess, forthcoming about the support that is available for students? It's a really good point. Thank you. Raj, what do you think?
I feel like if universities wanted to create a more inclusive environment, then they'd probably have to look into how, I don't want to say go into like a quota-based system, because I feel like that's equally as bad as not having representation at all. But they'd have to look into why maybe they don't have much representation and try to fix things at the root cause.
I feel like you have put that very well done. But yeah, a really, really good point about figuring out what are the barriers that students might face in those institutions, or in general, and how can universities help to reduce those as much as possible. Really thoughtful, thank you. So moving on slightly now, and Raj, I know this is a little bit like further on the horizon for you, but I think it's really interesting to still get your perspective on this, because I think you'll already be thinking about what happens when you start university. And obviously, Gina and Ikra, this is very immediate for you. So what is your main concern about going to university? I'm going to leave it open, actually. I'm not going to give you any prompts, and you can let me know what you think. And let's start with you, Gina.
Personally, I need mental health support. I think for others I know as well, I need people to reach out to me, because that's something that I won't do if I'm struggling. And I think that is something that I've got friends who've had to defer or go home because they didn't know where to turn to, or they didn't necessarily feel like people were being as, you know, like, I'm here, you can speak to me, that there are people there. Because moving to a big city alone or away from home for the first time, you really, really need to be supported. So I think that's what I'm most worried about.
So mental health support is a big one, wellbeing support is a big one, and making it really clear what is there, so that it's not all down to you, perhaps, to reach out and find out what those things are. Really good point, thank you. Ikra, what about you?
I think I'd say like social interaction and like making new friends. Because like in the past 2 years we've been like sitting at home, like work from home, school from home, and like I feel like my confidence like went down, had like a little dip, and now like going to university and like completely different and like new, and it's gonna be like kind of scary. But it is like reassuring to know that everyone's in the same boat, everyone's had the same kind of confidence dip perhaps. But yeah, I think that's my main worry.
Yeah, really interesting point. You're definitely not alone. You probably saw it. We had a poll on the student room the other week, which was asking year 13s what they were most apprehensive about with starting university, and making friends was the biggest concern in that poll. So you're definitely not alone, which hopefully is comforting, as you say, kind of in and of itself. But yeah, a really good thing for universities to be aware of as well, in terms of facilitating those interactions that are really important in terms of making friends. Thank you. Raj, thinking about roughly a year ahead, what's on your mind most when it comes to starting university?
I'm thinking a lot about how I'm because I'm planning to move away from home. I have to learn how to manage myself, and that's the main problem. And then other things kind of stem off from that. So like financial, time management, social. Because obviously, if you've been living with your parents or caregivers up till now, there's loads of things going on in the background that then suddenly you have to be the manager of when you're living on your own.
I like that. Be the manager of, got to be the manager of your own life and your own self. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would remember how that felt as well when we all were first heading to university if we went. But yeah, there's a lot of resources out there, but it's a good thing for us to be aware of in terms of making sure that, I mean, if you're thinking about that now, and you've just finished year 12, there's potentially a whole year there for you, or for you to be building skills, but also for you to be supported in building those skills. So really, really interesting point. Thank you. Great. Next question for you. What specific support, and this potentially links on a little bit to what we just discussed, but what specific support are you looking for from your chosen university to help you feel more secure and confident in coming to university? Could be related to what you've just shared about what your biggest concern is, but is there a specific thing that you're like, I really hope that I will have access to this, or I really hope that I'll get support with this particular thing? I know, Gina, you've already kind of touched on it a little bit, but is there any sort of specifics that you would add to what you've shared so far?
Yeah, of course, not only with mental health side of things being reached out to, you know, also, things also financially, but also with a workload, with the new workload, because I think that's something that often slips my mind, is the fact that it is going to be increased, it's going to be something that I'll struggle with. And that will tie into mental health. And that I think I would need help with, knowing where to go, knowing that there are people there to help me with that would be very helpful.
Definitely. Amazing. Thank you. And Ikra, what about you?
I feel like definitely a resource on like how a day is going to run, because I'm used to like lessons and just lessons, and like uni is going to be like lectures, seminars, like independent work, coursework. I think I'd appreciate something to like, you know, show me how it's going to run, how it's going to be structured, how it's going to fit into like all this stuff, and like independent work, like what's expected, and like all of that, because I'm just used to like lesson after lesson and like homework at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. The actual structure of your day. How is it actually going to look? Yeah, really interesting. Thank you. And Raj, is there anything that you can think of that perhaps you'd like when you do start university, but is there anything, I guess, especially in your shoes, thinking about the next year, is there anything that would be helpful in terms of universities reaching out to you earlier, maybe, and helping you develop things or providing support earlier?
I'm not entirely sure, but I think just knowing the fact that people have gone through this process before helps a great deal massively already. So if I can find any resources, any support services, I feel like they're going to be out there no matter what issue I face. So I feel like quite a lot of them might be out there already.
Interesting, but maybe you just need to know what is out there. Might be useful. Okay, cool. Amazing, thank you. And this is the last of our kind of questions that we got from before the seminar, and then I'm going to start coming to some questions that we've had come through from the audience. So what is most important to you when you're picking where you're going to live for university? And that might be like physically, like the town, or if you commute, for example, but it also might be more specific to do with the accommodation. Just whatever is important to you when you're picking where you want to live for university. And Ikra, let's come to you first.
I think I would consider the location in the city. Like, I want to be close to university. I don't want to have to get a bus to get to university from my like, accommodation, but I'd also want to be close to like the shops I need to go to and stuff, because I probably won't have time to the grocery shopping when I've got assignments due and stuff. But yeah, if I'm close to university, I think that's fine.
Amazing, thank you. Somewhere close to uni, so you don't spend all your time commuting. Right. Gina, what about you?
I think this is very like a quite personal thing as well. I chose quite an isolated campus, but I like greenery. I really like greenery. I think it's good for a lot of things. So that's what I base mine on as well, largely.
Super interesting point. Oh yeah, I love that. Really interesting. Thank you. The physical environment, or the natural environment, more to the point. Raj, what about you?
I feel like I'd rather live on a campus-based university rather than a city one or a city-based campus. So like everything's in the same place. And it's not as deep as an answer as to the other questions, I guess, but I cannot share a bathroom. Never ever will I ever share a bathroom.
Fair enough. This question was all about what's important to you, Raj, and that is important to you. Hilariously, I was having a conversation recently where one person had shared a bathroom when they were at uni and another person hadn't shared a bathroom. And they were talking about how gross it was to share bathrooms. This was their words, how gross it was to share bathrooms. But it turned out they had met a lot of their friends because they lived in that much more communal, not in the bathroom, because they lived in that much more communal sort of facility, whereas the other person was talking about how they hadn't met as many people. So I'd never actually thought about the role that shared nature of things could play until that conversation. But it's a really interesting point about, yeah, facilities, but interesting to come back to that friendship question as well. Amazing. Thank you so much for your thoughts so far. We do have about 20 minutes left to go, or just under, because we'll finish up a little bit early and say goodbye to everyone. But I've got a few questions from the audience. We're going to jump around the place a little bit with these questions, and some of them are related to some things that you have shared so far. So let's start with this one, because I was hoping we would get time to ask a question a little bit like this one. And the question is, how important is a university's stance on sustainability in the choice that you're making? And what does sustainability mean to you? And maybe we can go to hands up from you. If you feel like you would like to answer this question, pop your hand up and I'll come to you. So how important is sustainability in your choice, or university stance on sustainability, and what does it mean to you? Gina.
I think sustainability is important. It's one of those things that a lot of people don't consider. And I think it is important, but it's not one of the most important things when looking at universities, I guess. It's not what I don't think it's something that a lot of people would look for first.
Cool, thank you. Raj.
I feel like nowadays a lot of stuff tends to be performative. So if the university is offering a goal or like a my mind's just gone blank. If the university is offering a goal or some research oriented towards how they can be sustainable or how they can make sustainability more effective, then that's good. However, if it's just some sort of we support sustainability and there's nothing to back it up, then there's really no point in saying it at all. So I think it needs to be something concrete rather than a performative thing.
What a insight. Amazing. Thanks, Raj. Ikra, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Raj. Like, if university would take some action, like, I don't know, with packaging or the cafes around it, if, you know, the university took action, that'd be good, because, like, if I'm going to spend like 5 years at university, you know, it'd be nice to see that universities do support current issues and they do care about the environment and like how we should protect the earth. Yeah, I think it would be good if university does show that we do support the like current issues of sustainability, like how important it is.
Amazing, thank you. Great. Let's move on to another question now. This question is, when it comes to looking at universities and courses, what do you look for? Specifically, do you look at NSS scores, the National Student Survey scores, graduate outcome information, if the university has received any accolades or awards, and how much is your decision potentially swayed or not by those things? And again, I'll invite you to put your hands up if you would like to answer that one. Raj.
Something that I look at a lot is statistics from surveys of like student satisfaction and then university league tables. So if the league tables are like really high, I'd consider it. But then if I saw that the student satisfaction was very low, then that would drop down again, in my opinion. So I think things like that are very important and can reveal a lot about what's going on at the actual university itself before you go.
Amazing, thank you. Ikra, your hand was up next.
I didn't really look at a lot of that when I started to apply. It was more, I looked at like a couple of stuff where it was like this percentage of like students went on to this job or whatever, but it was mainly influenced by like students, like talking to students on Unibuddy. That was more helpful because like students would be like, oh yeah, I enjoyed it, or like, you know, don't come here, it was really horrible or whatever. I don't really look at the stats because they can be biased at times, and like I don't really know how they're calculated, but I didn't look at a lot when I applied.
Amazing, thank you. Lots of in-depth research happening there, it sounds like. Gina, did you want to jump in on that one? You popped your hand down. It's up to you.
Yeah, no, I never really looked at any of that when applying. I really wasn't that interactive when it came to looking stuff up myself, and my parents didn't really care or help. So I kind of went by like sort of, you know, videos about students who would speak about how they felt and how their course was. And I think like knowing how people experience things like that for me were more important than things like league tables and what jobs it led on to do, because experience was a large part of it.
It's really interesting, thank you. I think some of the answers you're giving are also answering some other questions that have been submitted too, so that's wonderful. On a similar note, I suppose, someone has asked, did you receive much support in applying to university from your school? Did they have much of an influence in where you chose or where you're choosing to study? School or college, I should say. Who would like to answer that question? Ikra.
Yeah, so we had like a person who was like helping us with all of the application process, and like they helped with the self-statement and like UCAS and all of that, but they didn't like directly influence my choice. It was just kind of helping me on like what to expect and how to apply, but I kind of decided which myself, like alone. I didn't really have anyone influencing me.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you. So there was support there, but your decision you felt like was really your own. Nice. Gina, what about you?
I really don't want to sound like I'm putting my college down, but I felt so lost and so unsupported. I asked for help with my personal statement. I was told that it was bad. And then I got feedback from people that I cared about and they said it was fine. But I honestly, they kept telling me to rewrite it and they would never have time to help me, and it was just awful. So I felt like absolutely not. My college was terrible for that, and I felt really lost.
I'm so sad to hear that that was your experience, but it's really important that you share those things like that. So thank you for doing that, because it's important for us to all realize that not every student is coming to an application or a university with the same level of support. So it's really important to make sure that we're able to help in those circumstances where perhaps students aren't getting levels of these. So thank you for that. Raj, do you want to jump in or should we crack on? Cool.
No,
we'll
I
keep
think
going.
it's been answered, yeah.
Thank you. I'm just trying to find the next question that I was going to ask. This one, again, is a little bit different. Did you ever consider studying online? Why or why not? like to pop your hand up if you would like to answer that question. You're allowed to answer it with a no, I didn't, by the way, if that is your answer. Gina, I think your hand was up first.
Yeah, no, I didn't personally, but only because I don't want to stay at home, and I like hands-on approach to things too. I think that's really good for learning. So I liked the idea of being able to interact with people face to face, and
Amazing, thank you. And thank you for kind of explaining what went into that choice. Ikra, what about you?
I did see that like my course was offered by the Open University, which is like an online kind of based university, but like the fees are the same, and like I just see a point in it because I couldn't see myself like doing a degree like in my own bedroom for like 4 years. I just couldn't see that, and like the support would be quite minimal because it's all online and you wouldn't like see anyone or have any meetings, so it just seemed quite dead in a sense to me. So yeah, I didn't consider that at all.
Thank you. Yeah, really interesting. It's interesting hearing you reflect on what you could or couldn't see yourself doing as well. Thank you. Raj, what about you?
I think if you're choosing to go to university, then like an iconic part of everything is the experience that you have there. And looking back on the last few lockdowns, when we had to learn, well, my school decided to teach us from home, and that was absolutely dreadful. And it was very stressful. So I wouldn't want to go through that again willingly.
Yeah, fair enough. I was wondering whether any of you would talk about having had lots of experience with online learning already. So yeah, really interesting to hear your perspective on that. Thank you. I think we've got time for a few more questions. This one is coming back to open days. Do you consider the costs involved in attending open days? And has this ever put you off open days? And I guess, I don't know if this relates at all to whether you experience virtual open days as part of that. But yeah, the cost of open days, kind of how would you reflect on that? Pop your hand up if you've got a thought you'd like to add. Raj.
I've been to 1 or 2 open days that were accessible to me because they were close by, but there's been a load that I haven't been able to because they're quite far away. So I've had to do virtual open days instead. And like I said earlier, it's just really not the same. So I feel like to combat that, universities should try to bring virtual open days kind of up to the statue that actual open days are like. I'm not sure how that would look like, but yeah, the cost does deter some people, yeah.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that kind of virtual open days, where cost might be a deterrent, virtual open days can still really fill a void in that sense. It sounds like if they're offering the kind of value that you might have been able to experience at the university itself. Great, thank you. Ikra, what do you think? You're just on mute there, Ikra.
Yeah, definitely, because like some of them were quite far away. Like I think it was my third choice, King's College London. That was about 4 hours away from me. There was just no point in going to the open day then, so I did the virtual one. But then it wasn't the same. But I didn't get an offer at university because I decided to reject it anyway. But definitely the cost. Like the only 2 open days I went to like in person were my first 2 choices. But the rest of them, they just weren't worth it, and spending the like diesel going there.
So it can come down to priority, it sounds like, when you're deciding where to invest, I suppose, invest that time and that effort and that money to physically go to those campuses if you're able to. Cool. Gina, I'm gonna motor on unless there's anything that you would like to add. Cool. We've got a couple of questions around the kind of support that we were talking about earlier, some of it being that mental health support, but perhaps also support in, you were talking about kind of making friends, but also around sort of managing workload and things like that. So when it comes to that sort of support, there were a few times that you spoke about wanting it to kind of reach out to you, I suppose, as opposed to you having to find it. Thinking in sort of a practical way about that, how would you expect for that support to kind of enter your sphere of awareness, how would you, in what channels or ways would you expect to become aware of that sort of support? Gina.
From my personal experience, receiving emails, although it may be helpful, I don't think it's very popular to check emails at this age. Something that I forget to do. I mean, I get so many spam emails from unis that I'm not even applying to. I wish they would reach out via text. I don't know how realistic that is, but that's something that I would check. That's something that I would see. And also a lot of the emails that I would receive from unis wouldn't actually have the content in it. It would just say like email not looking good ? And that's, I don't know if that, but sort of the way that it would appear wouldn't be, yeah, I think maybe text or some sort of something like that would be helpful.
Cool, thank you. Ikra, what do you think?
Definitely agree with you, because I never check my emails. Like, I have like a million open, I've just never checked them. I think text is good, but I think I prefer like business WhatsApp, because I think that would, like, I'd check straight away probably. Text, WhatsApp, I think I've put it, and like the social media pages, like on Instagram we get a notification if like someone posted or something. So if social media, like university had like social media, that would be good as well. Some universities do, and that's quite useful, like the stories and stuff, you can kind of see what's going on, or they might update you on something quite quickly. But yeah, I think business WhatsApp and like social media are the best.
Super interesting that you mentioned social media. On that point, we've got a couple of questions about social media actually. And as you've raised it, I feel like it's a good time to ask, sort of, when you're looking at universities or you're trying to understand the experience, are you using their social media? Do you look at their social media? And if you do, what sort of channels would you look at? And is there anything that you would see when it comes to a university, or perhaps like an accommodation provider, or kind of anyone associated with that experience? Is there anything you would see as like a red flag if you saw it on their social media, or you saw them doing something on their social media that would put you off? How does that work for you? In what ways do you use social media as part of your journey toward university, I suppose? Ikra.
I know that all the universities that I applied to, they had social media. So they had Facebook and they had Instagram, and I think that was it. They had LinkedIn as well, but I didn't really use it much. I know for like Instagram, they had like posts and had like highlights and like different like frequently asked questions, and that was quite helpful. For the red flags, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe like some Instagrams like quite outdated, like they hadn't posted since like 2014 or something. That was just like fine, I'll just look elsewhere or like find the website. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure of a red flag. I feel like if universities like keep up to date with their page and like keep it kind of fresh, then I think that'll be fine.
Amazing, thank you. So yeah, things that are up to date are really helpful. Raj and Gina, is there anything that you would add when it comes to social media when you're applying to university or preparing to go to university?
I never checked it, to be honest. I just didn't, I don't know why, I just didn't check it. I can imagine it'd be helpful. I didn't really consider that as a thing that would exist and how it would work.
Yeah, cool, that makes sense. Raj, is there anything you'd like to add, or should we finish up with our last question? I think we've got time. I think we can sneak in like one quick one before we finish up. So the last question I'm going to ask you is, when you're kind of doing your research, when you're thinking about university, if you've got questions, would you rather ask questions to current university students at each uni, or would you rather look up the answers online? So for example, in something that had been published, like we were talking before about satisfaction surveys and things like that. Gina.
I would much rather ask the students, because I'm not very good at looking stuff up online. It gets confusing to me. I think it's nicer to know from someone's experience as opposed to, you know, what could perhaps be biased or skewed or hard to find online.
Cool, thank you. Ikra, what about you?
Yeah, I think definitely with asking students, you can get that kind of first-hand experience, and you can like kind of relate with them more, and they have already been through it all. So yeah, you just get a really good answer. I think if it's already been answered, that's like quite a generic answer. I might not find that most helpful.
Amazing, thank you. And Raj, over to you.
So far in my university search, I haven't really found an opportunity to directly talk to students. So I've just been looking things up and seeing what information I can get. But while doing that, like what Gina said, I try to look at if it's biased or not, where it's come from, and if it's out of date, because sometimes things can be from very like a long amount of years back. So if it is, then I'll probably ignore it and look somewhere more recent.
Amazing, thank you. Quick moment to check in with each of you. Is there anything that is sitting in your mind that you wish you had said at any point that you'd like to share before we finish up? Great, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Gina, Raj and Ikra. That's been amazing. I feel like there's going to be a lot of people on this call with a lot of kind of ideas sparked from that conversation. So thank you so much for taking time out of your holidays to come and be with us. I can see some thank you messages coming through there as well. So well done. And for everyone who's watching, hopefully we've got to answer a whole bunch of your questions. If there's any outstanding questions, the team at the student room will get in contact with you to try and support you to get some answers to those questions. And we'll also be sending around a recording after this as well. So enjoy that, share it with anyone you think would find useful. Lots of thank yous and good lucks, and enjoy your summers in the chat. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time this afternoon. Thank you so much, Gina, Raj and Ikra. It's been wonderful. And go and enjoy some sunshine, hopefully. We'll see you all soon. Take care.